Hello again. We've got a show that promises to be at least mildly interesting for your listening and watching enjoyment. I'm your host, Jared Correa. I'm the CEO of Red Cave Law Firm Consulting. For the Monologue, I've got maybe the most obscure perfect album we've ever done. In fact, it's so out of pocket, I'm not even going to tell you what it is, because you probably won't know it anyway. In the interview, we're talking with Tony Prieto of Answering Legal. In the counter program, we're bringing back one of my favorite games with new questions and a new title, Take This Job. Now, let's march. Yes, the rumors are true. I've teed up another perfect album just for you. And this is definitely the most obscure one I pulled from the deck. But before we begin, and to build the suspense, let's first recap our prior selections, starting with our most recent coverage. Paul McCartney's Ram from 1971. That's our latest addition to the list until now. The Who, Who's Next from 1971. Gordon Lightfoot's Sundown from 1974. Billy Joel's Street Life Serenade, also from 1974. Billy Joel's An Innocent Man from 1983. Paul Simon's Graceland from 1986. Tom Petty's Full Moon Fever from 1988. Uncle Tupelo's Anodyne from 1993. Snoop Dogg's Doggy Style from 1993 also. Sheryl Crow's The Globe Sessions, 1998. Coldplay's Viva La Vida or Death and All His Friends from 2008. And lastly, Taylor Swift's Folklore, bringing us into this decade with a 2020 release. Now, let's get our next one on there. In late 1990, Michael Penn was set up on a path to become a huge pop star. If that name sounds familiar, yes, he is Sean Penn's older brother and also the older brother of Chris Penn, another actor. At this point, by 1990, Sean Penn had been acting in movies for almost a decade. But Michael's debut album, March, did not release until September of 1989, the same year that his brother's movie, Casualties of War, had come out, and after Sean had already married and divorced pop star Madonna. Michael's March yielded 3 charting singles, No Myth, This and That, and Brave New World. Although I didn't buy the album right away, I remember that I did have the cassette single for No Myth, which was backed by B-side track Big House, another song on the album. The video for No Myth was great. It was Michael Penn and his keyboardist in an apartment, and the camera pans into 2 other apartments throughout the video. I distinctly remember this one lady during the video just tearing through all the stuff beneath her sink looking for something she couldn't find. There's probably some symbolism there. I still don't know what it would be. And despite the fact that Michael Penn had set out to make the anti-video, meaning, in his words, no breaking glass, no cleavage, and no cars, I find that to be an odd list, he still won the clumsily titled award for Best New Artist in a Video at the 1990 MTV Video Music Awards, back when those were still a big deal. He lost in Best Male Video to Don Henley's End of the Innocents, though. What the fuck is up with these award titles? Does the video have a gender? The March album was also roundly praised by critics. Many mentioned favorable Beatles comparisons, not bad, and it was viewed as an achievement in power pop. As the 1990s kicked off, or the beautiful decade, as I like to call it, everything was coming up Michael Penn. And all the praise from March at that time was pretty much deserved. I mean, hey, I wouldn't be talking about it if it wasn't a perfect album, right? No Myth is an instance where the main single from an album, March doesn't have a title track, but the song would be it if it did, is easily the best song. No Myth is pretty much the perfect pop song on a perfect pop album. It's a little transgressive. The label wanted Michael Penn to call it Romeo in Blue Jeans after a line from the chorus, but he refused. Though it also has tambourine in it, Davy Jones style. There's a weird little piece of lyrics in the middle of the song where he sings about a Chinese-speaking private investigator who dances like Fred Astaire in the ocean. Okay. But the guitar parts are insanely slick. There's even an electric cello in here if you listen closely. Percussion, including a large Persian drum called a daf, is used perfectly. and the sound just fills the room. Penn also deployed a Chamberlain keyboard, which is sort of like an analog predecessor to synthesizers, and which appears throughout the album, offering a symphonic contrast to the acoustic guitars and live drums, but mostly drum machines. It really is a highly unique sound. This is a great song to listen to with headphones on. There's just a lot going on. The vocals are strong, but not overbearing, and the lyrics are just quirky enough, but don't sound like they're written by a Scientologist exactly. The outro is just tremendous as the track slinks off. No Myth is the earworm to end all earworms. It's so fucking catchy. I don't think I've ever listened to this song without listening to it a second time immediately thereafter. If you listen to it, you won't be able to get it out of your head. Okay, you've been warned. But a lot of what makes No Myth great, interesting lyrics, yeoman-like guitar work, timely percussive beats, is present throughout the rest of the album. The next track, Half Harvest, kind of picks up where No Myth leaves off. Persistent percussion before additional instrumentation kicks in, and then here comes the guitar. The song slowly builds, and this may be some of Penn's best guitar playing on the entire record. One of the interesting things about Penn is that he writes some really inscrutable lyrics, like I have no idea what the fuck he's getting at the top of this song, but he is very good at bringing things back around by the chorus, which almost always sounds comparably normal. The first 3 songs on this album are just bangers. This and That is zippy from the start with lots of high-speed acoustic guitar strumming that steps right into the chorus, which gets something of a 60s style overlay featuring some more prominent tambourine. This and That is sort of a breakneck pop song. The Chamberlain keyboard sounds great here as a mid-song interlude and also used to good effect throughout the second half of the track. This song was the second single from the album and reached number 10 on the Modern Rock Tracks chart, which I guess was a thing in 1990. The video for this track is sort of like a sequel to the No Myth video. Again, Michael Penn is playing guitar and singing in a room, except more of his band is in there. Then we're looking into other rooms to see what's happening. Sound familiar? What's happening, you ask? A purported suicide attempt where the person apparently is just able to float on air when leaning over a balcony? A home invasion perpetrated by someone who looks like Bill Nye the Science Guy? I'm not making any of this up. And who avoids getting his ass kicked by an angry husband by simply walking in air? A man trapped underground for some reason? A lady sleeping on a bed for literally the whole video. She never wakes up. Then a man dressed up to look like one of the war boys from Mad Max hitting a single drum in the room with the band. Is he part of the band? I don't fucking know. But Michael Penn seems cool with him. Though this does mimic the album art on March, where a similar-looking man bangs a drum on the left side while a similar-looking woman cradles an hourglass on the right side. The album artwork is actually quite striking. I think Michael Penn just really hated making music videos. He even makes the questionable choice to wear a puffy shirt here, a full 3 years before Jerry Seinfeld was ruthlessly skewered for doing the same thing on an iconic episode of Seinfeld. Sadly, this video has no comments on Reddit. Perhaps we can come together to change that. Now, Innocent One is the song at the dead center of the album, and is probably the most straight-ahead pop song on the album. It's almost a ballad, but not quite. You know, as I think about it, I really hate ballads almost as much as I hate musicals, unless they're done like tremendously well. And March has no traditional ballads on it, which is probably one of the reasons I like it so much. This song is really well done, and I think it would have been a better choice for a single release than Brave New World, which was the third single off the album. We'll get to it. There are rising notes of musicality here, but the song is pretty tempered, and it represents a nice departure point from the rest of the album. This is also maybe the best single set of lyrics on this record. As you can tell by now, if you've listened to any of these album breakdowns, Perfect Album, for me, is one that is experimental in some capacity. It's not just a vibe wholly, it's got to be something that sounds different. One of the things I love about March is that all the songs are pretty well differentiated from each other. It's hard to say, oh, that sounds like a Michael Penn song, because stylistically, all these songs bring something different to the table, some more successfully than others. Invisible is another great track which starts off after the drumsticks count us in like it might be a standard pop song, something Counting Crows might have done, but then it goes off the rails in a good way with all these wild instrumental flourishes. Usually, Penn's songs are a good match in terms of inventiveness of lyrics versus inventiveness of instrumentation. But in Invisible, the instrumentation cup runneth over. This is a really cool song, which has sound segments that are like multiple songs being smashed together, like a stew of sweets. The album finishes strong with a couple of tracks that do not very much sound like each other. I'm sensing a theme here in Battle Room and Even Fall. And I should pause for a second here and say that Michael Penn is also really great at naming songs. Just some super unique shit here and more to come. This was certainly a man who had a great deal of trouble listening to his label. Battle Room is sort of an understated tune with one big flourish that completely works. It's a melancholy tune about fighting in relationships, which he seems to imagine as some kind of gladiatorial event done in a group setting, kind of like Backrooms, but for relationship battles, with a nice electric guitar flourish at the end, which is not utilized very often on this album. Even Fall starts off like a Chubby Checkers song. It's very 50s coded. Again, this comes out of nowhere. It's like, hey, here's another song. Let's try an entirely different genre. He's even throwing some horns in there. And again, there's a nifty little outro here before the song pauses and hits another big flourish at the end. I can't tell you what an Even Fall is, and I can't figure it out from the lyrics, but I even fell for it. Big House, the B-side of the No Myth single, sounds just like a Midnight Oil song. And this was right around Midnight Oil time, the period when Beds Are Burning and Blue Sky Mine were video hits. I always felt like Peter Garrett looked like Angry Caillou, but that is neither here nor there nor down under. I like Big House, it's a cool song, but it's probably the least interesting song musically on this album. The most interesting things happening here are when the drums sound like someone knocks at the door of the Big House. The track Disney's A Snow Cone / Bedlam Boys has a really weird intro, which is just a horn and a keyboard that sound like a funeral dirge, in which I think is a reference to Walt Disney having his head frozen so he could be reanimated. You know, just typical pop record shit. And I couldn't confirm that because there's not a lot of information online about this album, tragically. That was just a rumor, by the way. Disney was cremated. By the way, for me, Disney's an overpriced popcorn bucket. Although I believe they sell snow cones there as well. This song listens like an anthem and could easily have been another hit had it been released. Additionally, this is the only time on the album when backing vocals are used extensively, which makes it a unique outlier on this record full of unique outliers. Of course, there is certainly a reference in here to the derivation of the term Bedlam, which is a bastardization of Bethlehem, as in the Hospital of St. Mary of Bethlehem in London, one of the most notorious psych wards in history, which gave rise to a term describing uproar and confusion. Certainly, Michael Penn brings order to all of that with another finely crafted pop song. See what I did there? Brave New World was the third song released from March, but it's not one of my top songs on the album. It starts off like a riff on Bob Dylan's iconic, fast-talking, subterranean homesick blues, which it reverts to between somewhat more standard-paced lyrical sections. So, I understand why they thought to release this as a single. This one did chart, but while this track is catchy and you could probably exercise to it, with its flares of interest, it's kind of bringing up the rear on March. I would say that one of the things I like so much about March is that there's pretty much a lot going on within every song without it sounding overproduced. Brave New World probably gets the closest to getting there, being overproduced, that is, without quite crossing the line for me. Cupid's Got a Brand New Gun comes the closest to any song on March to becoming a traditional ballad, so it's probably why I least like it. It's my least favorite track here. And the lyric, "You've been shot down, wounded unto death by something called love," just grates at me. Something called love? Are we serious here? I feel like Michael could have workshopped that a little bit more. Usually his lyrics are really good. Even so, this track sounds very different from all the other tracks on the album, as usual. It's got sort of the skeevy vibe with some of the grimier guitar parts, and I like just how it ends abruptly. Another differentiated track on a really variable album. A perfect album, as it were. Now, a perfectly variable album? Yeah, that sounds good. Now, while I've listened to every track on March more times than I can count, I've never actually listened to any other Michael Penn songs. I don't want to. March is just such a perfect time capsule of 1990 for me. No Myth takes me back to being 12 years old and placing that brand new cassette single unwrapped into my cassette holder, which is such a different feeling than just firing it up on Spotify. A little more effort went into that. But if you're inclined, there is other Michael Penn to listen to. Post-March, Penn recorded an album in 1992 called Free For All, which is supposed to be very good and a lot like March, but it was not nearly as successful. After it, his album output petered out. He put out Resigned in 1997, then more albums in 2000 and 2005, but that was his last album, and his singer-songwriter career effectively ended over 20 years ago. Since then, he stayed busy, for sure. He married still active singer-songwriter Amy Mann. He's also spent a lot of time scoring films and television shows. He scores and has a cameo in Boogie Nights. And Paul Thomas Anderson, the director of Boogie Nights, One Battle After Another, which was clearly inspired by Battle Room, and other films, even directed the video for Penn's song Try, which was basically a 3-minute long tracking shot along a quarter mile inside one of the longest hallways in America. How's that for a fun fact? The last single Michael Penn published was called A Revival in 2018. Ironically, he hasn't done anything similar since, so it wasn't quite a revival. When the question is brought up about why Michael Penn didn't become a bigger star with a longer career in pop music, usually people reference timing. In between the release of March and Michael Penn's second album, a little song called Smells Like Teen Spirit released. Now, everybody was out on traditional pop and very into the grunge sound. Instantly, Michael Penn seemed like even more of a pussy than Richard Marx, and that was basically it for his career. It's too bad that Michael Penn's career could not have coexisted alongside Nirvana's, but times change, and consumerism is a fickle mistress. Of course, I like to think that Michael Penn perfected the 90s pop sound, and like a brilliant comet, was just never meant to persist into the 90s. He could never have done better. It was a moment in time, and it was no myth. Kind of like we perfected podcasting, but we'll be back next, persisting past the mid-2020s with Tony Prieto of Answering Legal, with whom we'll talk about intaking and podcasting. It's all next. Well, I've effectively run out of things to say, which is awkward because this is a podcast. So I'm going to run away. Actually, I won't run away, mostly because I'm not fast and likely could not escape, even if I tried. So, since I'm kind of stuck here, let's just interview our guest. My guest today is Tony Prieto, the marketing strategist at Answering Legal. Tony, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, I'm very grateful you didn't run away because I'm not sure I could host the show on my own.
Oh, you'd be great. In fact, relieve me from my prison. No, you got your own show, which we'll talk about in a second. But I want to start by asking you, like me, were an English major, English and creative writing. So may I ask you, why did you decide to do that other than making your best attempt to be unemployable?
So I know you usually ask your guests on here, like, how did you end up in law school? I can tell you the exact opposite, how I didn't end up in law school, because it's a fun story.
Yeah. Tell me that.
When I was like 12, illegally employed, my mom, who's a court reporter, knows every civil litigation attorney in Miami, found one who needed some files organized before he digitized them. And so she volunteered me, and it was supposed to be a 4-day job. I got it done in like a day and a half. And
look at you. Damn.
And the guy very nicely says, I'm not going to punish you for working hard. So I'm going to pay you for the full 4 days. So we're in the elevator heading back down to the lobby where he's going to hand me off to my mom. And he says, do you want to be a lawyer? And as any son of immigrants, or I believe Jewish parents would know, the answer is yes, because the two options are
or a doctor.
Lawyer and doctor. And I said, or a doctor. And he says, don't. And I go, what? He says, I'm miserable. I hate my job and my life. So he hands me the money. I immediately hand it to my
That's
mom.
amazing.
I tell him what he said, and my mom says, "Don't listen to him. He's crazy." But it stuck with
Is
me.
he? Is he?
I don't know. I don't know. But my father, when he eventually listens to this podcast, will curse his name because ever since then he's cursed his name.
Your dad was like, that just threw you off. You could have been on the lawyer path.
My dad says that ruined me. Yeah.
That's so funny. Okay, so how do you end up deciding on English? Are you like, I just like to write, or like, do you like to read?
I like both of those things. And
good start.
I've been a voracious reader my whole life. So I get to college, and my first year, where I went to school, luckily you don't have to declare a major until the end of your sophomore year. So you get 2 years to kind of play around. And in my first year, I was an econ major, and I hated it. So I decided, am I going to spend all 4 years here miserable and then end up on Wall Street miserable there, or am I going to do something I enjoy? So I picked the unemployable track. And so I picked English, and I had taken one creative writing course in the in like my first semester of freshman year, and I was terrible at it, but I loved it. So and the double major was so easy because it's like 8 classes to get a major in creative writing at my school. So
what was the econ thing? Like, too much math? Because that's why I would have been out. I would have tapped out.
No, I'm okay at math. Although I did get like a really bad grade in Calc 4. It was so boring. No offense to any econ majors up there. When they show you a supply and demand graph, you've learned all of it. All of econ, as they teach it in Western universities, is supply and demand, and then you adjust that. Okay, this is the labor market. This is how a minimum wage affects supply and demand. And once you see that graph, you're like, okay, I got it. The rest of this is boring.
So do you have a favorite book?
Wow. That is a really tough question. There's a lot of...
You can give me a few. I probably have like a top 5 that I can never decide on.
Yeah, it's almost impossible. I read A Personal Matter by Kenzaburo Oe, who's
I don't know that one.
Japanese
tell me a little bit about it.
Nobel laureate. Yeah. A man a man marries his wife, and he's like doesn't really have a job. He teaches at a cram school, which is like a Japanese institution for children who already do 12 hours of school to do 4 more of them to like try and raise their entrance exam.
Just like America.
Statistics. Yeah. 12 hours of school in 6 days a week. But he teaches at a cram school, and he hates his job, and his wife is pregnant. She gives birth to a baby with a birth defect. And that sends him into this spiral where he goes and hooks up with his like college girlfriend. He considers abandoning his whole life to move to Africa. And then eventually he comes back to his family. And the message of the book is kind of a sort of lecture at Japan, which is Kenzaburo is a pretty conservative guy. He says, instead of turning away from your tradition and honor and your family and toward something new and exciting, you should stick with what has worked. I took the complete opposite lesson, of course, but there's a moment where when he is with his ex-girlfriend there, when he sort of visualizes the life he could lead if he abandons his responsibilities and realizes that in that life he could be happy, but it would also be tough. It would be a difficult life, and he chooses an easy and unhappy life instead. And so I decide instead that I want a more difficult but happier life.
And our theme so far in the show is the hatred of jobs. So let's talk about your current job. You end up at Answering Legal. How did that go down? How did you end up there? Because that's a pretty close-knit team, from what I understand.
Yeah, I mean, I was only the third person to join the marketing department. Since then, we've added on a couple of people. Or rather, I wasn't the third person to join the marketing department. I was the third member of the marketing department. There had been other third members of the marketing department, much like the fifth Beatle. There's a
Billy Preston. Some debate over who the fifth Beatle is, but yes, go on.
I think that sociologically, in not very long, there's going to be a sort of micro generation defined of people who had their careers or education is disrupted by COVID. So this is going to make me sound...
That's a good point. No, I think that's fair.
This is going to make me sound like a baby, but I graduated college in 2017, and...
me too.
I went home to help my parents with something, figuring that, I could start my career at any point. And then I was helping my dad renovate a house because the idea was to move my grandparents in, my mom's parents in with them to take care of them in their old age. That took so much longer than my dad said it would. But there's 3 years between when I graduate college and when COVID hits where I could have started a career. And I still think that even if I had immediately gone to a job, I would have lost it in like the COVID recession, right?
Possible, for sure.
And basically would have had to start over. So after COVID, my brother, being the more practical and commonsensical of the two of us, had a job answering the phone for the New York Department of Labor, helping them manage their COVID unemployment. And that job taught me a lot about intake because everyone calls that place desperate. You know what I mean? Where's my money? I'm owed my money. It hasn't come in yet.
Ton of calls, I'm sure, during that period.
I'm homeless. How do I get my money? Oh, I'm sorry, you need an address. It's all kinds of problems. When that winds down, I applied to content writer jobs. And I think that the fact that I had been on the other side of the phone, even if it was in an unrelated sort of business, I'd worked at a call center, kind of gave me a leg up on other interviewees for the job because I had like an intimate knowledge of what we were selling, kind of.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. That's cool. Okay, so you're at Answering Legal, and just give me, like, for people who don't know, just give me the quick pitch about what Answering Legal does and why virtual receptionist services are valuable to law firms.
Yeah. The answer is that, we at Answering Legal answer for all kinds of lawyers, but especially attorneys who have very high value clients, like, for example, personal injury clients. When, let's say, right, the average case value of a motor vehicle accident is $6,400, missing a phone call is minus $6,400 in your revenue line,
right,
period.
Right, it's a big deal.
And so that's our sales pitch is, hey, we pick up the phone, we talk to them, human beings talk to them, as opposed to like I guess nowadays the other option is AI, but even when I started 4 years ago, it was still voicemail, and take down their information so that you can call them back and secure their business. Because the idea is you probably paid for that lead via marketing. And so if you want to improve your revenue, grow your firm, et cetera, you hire us, Answering Legal. And our key pitch is that we only answer for lawyers. Almost every other answering service out there.
Be pretty fucked up everyone if you didn't, given the name of the company. So good.
Yeah. Well, the name of the company ends up with a lot of people coming to us to ask us legal questions because they think we answer legal questions.
Right. Yeah. Are you lawyers?
We have a whole thing. We are not lawyers. We cannot provide legal advice.
What is the approach for you guys on AI? Like, how do you feel about it in the construct of reception? So I think it's a hot topic. Like, some people are like, it sounds great, it's cheap, and then some people are very concerned about it.
It's cheap, I think, is the strongest selling point for it because
as of right now, I think that's right. Yeah.
You don't have to pay a human being to answer the phone. Our position on it, we have an AI chatbot. Our position on it right now is that even if you have an AI service, it should never only be the AI service. It's just going to be less effective than a person. In the same way that voicemail is less effective than a person because people know when they're talking to a robot. It doesn't matter how nice it sounds.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. There's the uncanny valley that we still haven't quite crossed, but we have our own sort of take on AI that's in development, but it's probably still a while out.
Yeah. So you're taking your time trying to develop it correctly, which is probably what I would do if I were in your position. I get that.
Yeah. This company, Answering Legal, we own our own answering service software. We don't like white label it or whatever. And the company has a strong sort of vision of making sure that you own everything you sell so that you are never at the behest of someone else. And so that's the sort of ethos behind developing it ourselves.
You've seen a lot of intake. What is like the most common intake mistake that law firms make?
It's so funny. I think we asked you the same question on our show, Legal Intake Experts.
Right. We're doing I'll talk more about this in a second, but we're doing the podcast swap. So I wanted to get you back.
I mean,
it's like choosing your favorite book, right?
Yeah, exactly. Let's assume that you picked up the phone, which is a big assumption. I think that I know that there was a statistic that I would cite from a website that you wrote for. I don't remember what it was, that said that
so many,
a third of law firm phone calls are answered. Recent sort of statistics from the Clio Legal Trends Report say 40%. Assume that this is one of those 40% that gets answered, because
it's not good.
It's not good. I would say
so
that's
I guess
the
you
biggest
could say
one.
problem number one is not picking up the phone.
That is the biggest one, but that's such an obvious. There's such an obvious solution, answering legal, that that we can go beyond that, and it really is. I think the next biggest one, the one that's going to cost you the most money, is follow up. If this person represents a good case for you, you need to get back to them and secure their business within 24 hours, ideally. And that is tough.
I can attest to this. Yeah.
That's tough because
I would say that most law firms have zero follow-up architecture whatsoever.
I mean, you want to talk tech when a potential new client gets logged in, hopefully your CRM or whatever it is, you should have a reminder to ping you the next morning. Hey, call this guy. Even if they don't answer, right? Like, let's say they can't answer the phone. They will see that you called them, and that will make them more likely to stay with you instead of a competitor.
So starting small, pick up the phone. 1.
Yeah.
Follow up on the phone call. 2.
Yeah.
Now I have a really important question for you, Tony.
Yeah.
Why the fuck don't you have a LinkedIn? What's wrong with you?
So here's another reason why I had difficulty starting my career. I'm really bad at 2 things that you really need to be good at in this job market: self-promotion and social media. Call it networking. I
sometimes they go hand in hand as well.
Yeah. I hate talking about myself. I had nothing personal or like psychological about it. I feel much more comfortable in sort of this example as the interviewee learning about someone else than talking about myself.
Yeah. I get that.
And I have always been really bad at social media. So that's why I don't have a LinkedIn, because I wouldn't do anything with it.
You getting one, or no? You're out on LinkedIn.
Well, Nick, my boss and
Nick
co-host, Nick Worker,
yes.
He so when you were on our show, he said he had a surprise, which was he's going to force me to make a LinkedIn on the podcast.
And we never got to it because we never got to it. Too much.
At the end of the podcast, you said, "I think that we're forgetting something." Nick
that
said,
was
no,
it.
We got it all. That was it.
That was it.
You were on top of it. We were not. So I have dodged a bullet like Neo in the Matrix, but
happy to help, man.
Eventually, I think that I mean, I have a great idea for a LinkedIn post, but I would need to make a LinkedIn to make it. So.
All right, everybody wait for that. I don't like the self-promotional stuff is awful on social media. I can't stand it. I'll be honest with you. One of the reasons I do so much podcasting is because it allows me to make posts on social media without like talking about myself constantly. I can center other people, and I think that's great. And it sounds like you're doing something similar. You're just not on LinkedIn. I was reading through your bio page at Answering Legal.
Mm-hmm.
And I came across this interest you have in film, including horror films.
Sure.
So this is a good time to ask this, because currently, as of the recording, there are 2 kind of new wave horror films that are making waves in the theaters. So there's Backrooms, with Kane Parsons, who's a really young filmmaker, and then there's Obsession, which is Curry Barker, I think. Just crushing it at the box office, both of them. What do you think about these movies because they're sort of different than the traditional horror movie, right? Have you seen them?
I haven't seen either of them. I know that, okay, so Kane Parsons is, the Backrooms is this whole, it was
It's a whole
YouTube
lore, right?
lore
Creepypasta
thing.
type of shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when the studio that went to produce it, bought the rights to produce it, they brought the original creator, Kane Parsons, on to make it, which I think is rare in this day and age.
Yeah, but maybe becoming less rare because the movie's kicking ass.
It's so interesting because horror movies release at 2 times of the year, right? They release in the summer if they don't think it's going to make a lot of money, and they release in October if they think it's going to make a lot of money. And I'm pretty sure, both of these are killing it. The studios made a horrible miscalculation with what the popularity of these movies would be.
Clearly.
Yeah. I mean, I think Obsession beat out, what was the other movie?
Beat out The Mandalorian. Like
The Mandalorian and Grogu. Yeah.
Basically, like Mandalorian was number 1, and then I think Obsession's been number 1 for like 2 weeks now. And Mandalorian just fell. But the Obsession one is interesting to me because it's based on the monkey's paw story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But the dude who created the movie didn't learn about the monkey paw from the book. He learned about it from the Simpsons episode about the book.
Yeah, the monkey's paw curls,
which I find to be hilarious.
It's you could say something about the degeneration of culture, but you could also say it's about the sort of long tail of the Simpsons.
Well, also, like the monkey's paw book was inspired by something else that no one knows about. So,
a genie grants you a wish, but it also becomes your worst nightmare. It's an ancient story, right?
I'll ask you the same question I did about books. Do you have a favorite horror movie that you would recommend to people?
Favorite horror movie? So I'll go with 2. One of them is a little older. It's called It Follows.
I've heard of that one. I haven't seen it. Yeah,
it's about a sexually transmitted killer. So when you, in this story, the main person has a one-night stand with someone, and then he ties her up and presents her, hey, if this ever catches you, it will kill you and then come back for me. And so the whole story is
STD. That's a serial killer.
Exactly. It's like a ghost. It's a spectral force. Only the person currently targeted can see it. And one of the things that makes the movie so much fun and also terrifying is that there's only a couple of confrontations with the killer, but while they're going around trying to solve this problem, there will be a wide shot as the car drives by, and on top of a house behind them is the monster. It's just sort of in the background, always lurking. It has like a really high creepiness factor. Yeah. And then more recently, people call it a horror movie. I don't really think it is, and not in a negative sense. Is I saw the TV Glow, which is by director Jane Schoenbrunn, and it is a phenomenal film about sort of identity. The director is
I've heard of
trans,
this one too. I also have not seen it.
Yeah, the director's trans and tells a story about played by a young man played by Justice Smith, I believe is his name, from the Detective Pikachu movie. And
classic. That's classic shit right there.
He falls in love with a show that he would watch with this girl in his high school or whatever, and the boundary between the reality of the show and his life starts to thin, and he discovers things about himself. And it is one of the most distressing movies I've ever seen. But it really is, it's a powerful film, I think.
Good recommendations. Okay, let's talk about another recommendation. Your podcast called The Legal Intake Experts Podcast. And the good news is that you can listen to it right on Legal Broadcasting Company.
That's right.
We are syndicating the show. So check it out. Why did you guys start that podcast? It's you and Nick. And what is it about for people who haven't listened to it yet?
Yeah. So the Legal Intake Experts. So we at Answering Legal produce a few podcasts, and our other sort of flagship podcast, which is Everything Against the Law, everything except the law, where
I mean, that maybe that's your next podcast.
yeah, everyone against the law is sort of an anarchist podcast. Everything except the law is an interview podcast where we would bring in lawyers, sort of legal industry experts, ask them questions. And we decided to do another one that didn't require guests so that we could produce content on a regular basis without also needing to work around other people's schedules and stuff. Now, we have had guest hosts on Legal Intake Experts. That's our gimmick, because we don't have any guests. We have guest hosts.
Gotcha. Okay.
And Nick also loves to be on the podcast. He loves to talk to people and stuff like that. Yeah. Yes. And so finding one that we could make just the two of us means that we could just podcast whenever we want.
That's as good a reason as any. And you talk about like intake strategies for the most part, broadly speaking, kind of ripped from the headlines.
I should have talked what the show is about. It's obviously about intake.
Yeah, go ahead. Now's your opportunity.
Our producer, Joe, here's how the format of the show works. Our producer, Joe, does a lot of research, comes up with topics. We try to explore these topics on the podcast, and Nick tears us off onto a tangent. It's sort of like the color commentary and the play-by-play. I'm the play-by-play. My job is to pull Nick back to the topic we're supposed to talk about. But usually it is intake.
Yeah, I have to say, like, obviously I think the show is good. And one of the best things about it is the thumbnails you guys create.
Yeah.
The thumbnails are probably my favorite podcast thumbnails out there. Would you like to tell people a little bit how that process works? Because that's a Joe thing, right? Yeah. Can I shout out Joe here? Okay.
Absolutely. Shout out to our producer, Joe. Joe is the man behind the curtain on all of our stuff. Joe obviously is in the studio with us when we're recording and listens to think of anything that we really came up with and tries to find a way to make it a fun thumbnail. And then at the end of the show, we take a picture of our faces or whatever, doing funny faces. And then our designer, Tyler, this is the best part of his job, will get, once the video is fully edited, our designer, Tyler, will just get a note in Slack that says, "Hey, we want you to do the Mario Brothers. Here's these pictures."
I love the Mario Brothers one. That was great.
I don't know if there was one with an extended baseball analogy. We were playing around with Nick batting and I was the baseball screaming. I don't know if that one ever made it to production, but yeah, they are the most fun that Joe has, and they're the most fun that Tyler has, our designer. So I'm glad that they're a hit.
I gotta say, like, the podcast is worth it for the thumbnails alone. So definitely check it out. Let me spin back a prior question on you, because you hear a lot about lawyers, and you're like, I get it. People are like, lawyers suck. They're awful people. They do bad shit. Like, you hear, like, lawyers don't have the best reputation, and a lot of it is unearned, frankly.
I believe lawyers have the same sort of reputation as credit card companies and airlines.
Right. So not great. So let me ask you this. Like, have you seen some cool instances of lawyers doing unique and innovative things in terms of intake through your role?
Yeah. I'll shout out Chris Early. Chris Early hosts a podcast for us here at Answering Legal, The Early Show. Incredible name, but when you have that kind of name, you just sort of work with it, you know.
You got to use it.
And Chris is a personal injury attorney based out of Boston, and when we first met him, was to interview him on the Everything Except the Law podcast, and we talked about intake, and he talked about how his front desk people, his secretaries, receptionists, etc., he thought of them as first impression officers. And
yeah, that's cool.
And he would, whenever that a case came in, whenever they got a win, he would celebrate the person who answered the phone for it first and foremost. Because he thought of that as their win, not it was the firm's win, but the person who drove it home was the person who answered the phone and gave the first impression. And I thought that was, as someone, again, who had worked on phones in a rather uncelebrated role.
I dig this.
I thought that was really cool of him. I don't know if it was exciting and innovative, but it worked. Because
I think that's
his
exciting and
keeps growing.
innovative. And then he has the podcast on your network.
Correct.
Was that like you approached him, he approached you? How did that go down?
Chris Early loves to podcast.
Who doesn't love
if
you don't have a podcast, but you're just listening to this, start your own podcast.
Start a podcast. It does not take that much setup to get a decent sort of audio-visual setup. He goes to a lot of masterminds and such, and he's constantly networking, meeting other lawyers. And I believe that we came to him to ask him if he wanted to do a podcast. And I think he liked the idea at first, but as I was telling the producer of this show, Evan, he has filmed episodes all the way out to December, and we release 2 a month. So what he does is he meets people and he says, "Hey, do you want to come on my podcast?" And then he asks them about their lives and careers, etc. But it was definitely, we reached out to him because we wanted to. I mean, a podcast is such a great piece of content because it's 30 minutes, 45 minutes long, and you get to just cut it up into other pieces of content and put those on and just constantly have a long, just sort of a long list of stuff that you are constantly uploading to keep the algorithms happy.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't podcast because they feel like they got to be like Joe Rogan or some shit for it to be viable. But like if you're a lawyer and you're just looking to provide content for your clients and some number of new clients, like the numbers don't have to be crazy for you to be successful at that.
I mean, they'll come up, if you, let's say, record a podcast talking about your specific practice area and just talking about details about these things. What happens in a case? How does this case move from new matter to resolved, and what are likely outcomes and stuff like that? You put it on your YouTube channel. When people Google you, that will come up, and they'll click it and they'll say, "Wow, this guy knows what he's talking about." While Google's still alive, that is.
Oh my God, you think Google's going away? Remember,
No.
Google owns YouTube. YouTube's not going anywhere.
But what was it? I think that it was an Ahrefs study that said that the top result on a search query with AIOs gets 56% less clicks than the ones without them. So,
Makes
they'll
sense.
Google you, but the AI, the Google AI is going to be the one that tells you, "Hey, check out this video," and not the results. But
Right. AI overview for sure.
Yeah.
Or AI mode. Tony, this has been stirring and delightful, but will you stick around for one final segment before you go?
I didn't think I was allowed to leave.
No, you're not. All right, everybody, We'll be back with Tony Prieto, who's imprisoned here on the podcast. Welcome to the Counter Program. It's a podcast within a podcast. This is a conversational space where we can address usually unrelated topics that I want to explore at a greater depth with my guests. Expect no rhyme and very little reason. Tony, welcome back. How you doing?
Glad to be here. And in case the audience wants to know, I have no idea what's happening right now. Just a little bit behind the curtains. I don't know what's about to happen.
That's the plan. Okay, so I decided that I was going to bring back a game that I've run before. In fact, I've run it with your co-host of Legal Intake Experts previously, Nick Worker.
Sure.
But I've been having a hard time labeling this game, so I'm trying out another title for it. I'm going to call it Take This Job. Let me tell you how it works.
Okay. I remember this now. Yeah.
So when I did this with Nick, I had a job that I described to him called Panda Fluffer, which is basically like getting your panda ready for a sexual engagement.
Very important job.
He was so excited that I was talking about pandas because apparently he loves pandas. He didn't hear the second thing I said,
Uh-huh.
which made for some great thumbnails of our own. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm putting a little twist on it. I am going to read you the description of a historical job. So no current jobs, because at some point current jobs are just going to be I interact with AI. Historical job description, and you just need to tell me whether or not it's real or if I'm making it up.
Okay.
Pretty simple. So if you're ready, I'm going to give you the title, I'm going to give you the description, and then you can tell me, and feel free to iterate on the topic as well. Just try to figure it out, and I'll keep track of your score. I will say ahead of time, I've been podcasting for 17 years. No one has ever gotten a perfect score on any of my quizzes. So you could be the first. No pressure.
No pressure.
First job, whipping boy. This was a young boy educated alongside a prince who received corporal punishment on the prince's behalf when the royal misbehaved. This was an official position in the 15th and 16th century in Europe. Because tutors were not allowed to hit royal children, a companion boy was punished instead, in the hopes that the prince would feel guilty and remediate his own behavior. Was this a real job? Whipping boy.
Yes, and it was entirely unsuccessful because the 15th and 16th century Europe had some really bad monarchs.
Yeah, they didn't seem to learn the lesson.
No,
right?
They did not.
Charlemagne's over there like, yeah, just continue to beat the shit out of that kid. I don't care.
The only lesson the Habsburg line learned about was inbreeding.
Yeah, they loved a little inbreeding for sure. All right, I see we have a very confident contestant on the show today. This is great. So you've heard of that before, I'm assuming.
Yes, I have.
Yeah. I always start with the easiest one, but go ahead.
Yeah,
keep going.
The European royals, if you can imagine something that is worse than the whipping boy, I'm sure that it exists.
I feel like if you can imagine something fucked up that happened in medieval Europe, it probably happened.
Sure did.
Let's continue to test that theory. Job number 2, toad eater. This was a traveling quack doctor's assistant who ate live, seemingly poisonous toads and then was miraculously cured to show that the doctor's patent medicine worked. Active in 17th and 18th century Europe, these assistants essentially pretended to be poisoned for the benefit of their boss. And interestingly, this job gave rise to the modern insult, toady. Is this real or false? The toad eater job.
I'm going to go with false.
This was a real job.
You know what?
Kind of crazy.
I stuck with my gut. I was like, this can't be real. And then you said toady at the end. I thought, oh, wow, it is real. But I had to stick with my guns. This is for the snake oil salesman.
How large the toad is, honestly. Yeah. I feel like they gotta be small. Yeah.
Couldn't even saute them or something.
No, I mean, that might kill the poison. Or the purported poison.
True. Not that they knew how the poisons worked.
You're a movie guy. Have you seen the Ballad of Buster Scruggs?
I have,
yes.
Brothers?
They have that medicine man. Not eating toes, but that's a good segment of that movie.
The snake oil salesman.
Right. Yes. All right, you're 1 for 2, which is respectable. So don't feel bad. Now my third one is Gourd Patrol Guards.
Mm-hmm.
Gourd, Gourd.
Mm-hmm.
This was a border guard active during the Mayan Empire, whose job it was to suss out whether traders entering the empire's borders were attempting to smuggle cacao beans in hollowed out gourds. Cacao beans were highly valuable to the Mayans and were even used as currency. These border patrol agents would tap the gourds, listening for a hollow sound. Were there gourd guards in the ancient Mayan Empire?
Now that I can no longer get a perfect score, the pressure's
off. You can
off.
fuck around. You can do whatever you want.
I want this to be real so bad. So I'm going to say yes.
It is fake, sadly.
Yeah, thought so. Too good to be true.
But it would have been amazing.
Chocolate Cops is too good to be true.
That's some Willy Wonka stuff. Oh my God. I didn't even think of that. That's beautiful. All right. If I do this again, if I rerun this at some point 15 years from now, I'm going to call it Chocolate Cops. Number 4. Wow. We're already at number 4. Okay. Number 4. Groom of the stool. Have you ever heard of this before?
I know what those words mean separately.
You are spot on. Groom of the stool. This role emerged in 15th century England during the reign of Henry VII. The job was to set up the queen or king's toilet by providing toiletries and towels. Remember, there is no indoor plumbing for our listeners. The groom would analyze the monarch's bowel movements along with the doctor in order to continually monitor the king's health. Despite the nature of the position, the close proximity to the throne, see what I did there, made this a highly sought-after position. The groom of the stool, bathroom attendant to the king. Real job?
This is early modern at this point, but in Europe, people who dealt with poop were highly respected. I'm going to say yes.
Correct.
Yeah.
Real job. Really wild. I had not heard of this until I was researching stuff for this podcast.
Our sort of cultural, we look down on garbage men, sanitation workers, and stuff like that. It was the opposite in the medieval era because those were the only people who made sure that the town didn't smell like feces during the day. They went out at night, they scooped up the poop, and they were very well respected.
And there was another medieval job. I don't know if you've heard of this one, called a pure finder. And you had to find old white pieces of shit and collect them because it was used in some industrial process. That was their entire job. That's not a job. I think I'd rather be the groom of the stool because
100%.
I'm like poking. Is this soft or hard? Not ideal.
You're at the right
Not
hand
ideal.
of your job is to sit at the right hand of the king and tell him, if it floats, it's good.
All right, number 5, cloud weaver. Cloud weaver. This role was occupied by medieval European artisans in support of the military. This job entailed the boiling of sheep tallow in pots in strategically positioned areas on the battlefield during live engagement. The smoke would be used to confuse the enemy or hide the presence of archers. Smoke screens have been utilized throughout military history, this being a very early use case. Were there cloud weavers present
imagine the smell
on medieval battlefields?
Have you ever cooked
the
lamb?
stench? I call lamb the other purple meat.
Yeah.
I fucking hate lamb. I think it is terrible.
It smells so
I have
bad
tried.
when you're working with it.
I have tried to eat lamb. It's awful. So I can't do it. I have Greek friends who are like, hey, try lamb. Like, try it this way. It's different. It's not different.
Yeah, I'm picking chicken every time at like a Middle Eastern restaurant. I'm picking chickens over lamb every time.
Me too.
I'm gonna go with false. This seems a little advanced.
This is false.
Yeah,
Not real. Although I think it would be an effective military tactic.
yeah.
Since apparently the lambs would smell really bunk. And then also like there is smoke that it produces. All right, you got one more.
That was the giveaways. It's too effective. They didn't know what they were doing back then.
Right. You are 3 of 5. Very well done. And I think you kind of threw one away, so I'm going to give you 4 of 5. Last one. Knocker upper. It's not what you think.
Okay. I've seen the Seth Rogen movie.
Upper. This job required one to become a human alarm clock during the early 20th century in the United Kingdom and Ireland when actual alarm clocks did not exist. These people would wake up factory workers by tapping on their windows with long bamboo poles or using pea shooters to the same effect, in part so they could reach upstairs windows from the ground. The knocker-upper would not leave until the factory worker woke up and headed to work. Is a knocker-upper, or was a knocker-upper, a real job? Because now we all have phone alarms.
You said the early 20th century?
Early 20th century in the United Kingdom and Ireland.
It's a tough one. They were real brutal, those factory workers.
Right.
They cycled through them like paper.
Yeah, I feel like they had a lot of turnover.
I can imagine a more efficient way to wake up factory workers. Just a big ass bell. So I'm going to say no.
Oh, true. That's a good point. But apparently in early 20th century Britain and Ireland, they had not thought of that. And this was an actual job that you could hold.
Yeah. Yeah, I should have gone with my gut, which is if there's a way to dehumanize the factory worker, the British knew how to do it.
That's very true. Now, you may be asking yourself, who woke up the knocker-uppers? And there was actually a separate job for people who would stay up all night long to make sure that the knocker-uppers were awake in the morning and could go wake up the factory workers. So it was a whole cycle.
It's a tale as old as time. Who watches The Watchmen?
Tony, tremendous work. We'll end on that note. Who watches The Watchmen? I would ask, who listens to legal intake experts? Everybody, or should be everybody.
You certainly should if you're not.
Catch up on the legal intake experts at Legal Broadcasting Company. Continue to listen to Legal Late Night. And Tony, thanks again for coming on. We'll have you back sometime.
This was an absolute pleasure, Jared. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thanks to our guest today, Tony Prieto, who is the marketing strategist at Answering Legal. To learn more about Tony and Answering Legal, visit answeringlegal.com. And to listen to the legal intake experts, visit legalbroadcastingcompany.com. Now, because I'll always be a 90s kid whose DVD of Boogie Nights is in a bin in his basement somewhere gathering dust alongside a CD copy of March, but his true passion is burning CDs for anyone who would listen, I'm now just doing the modern version of that, which is creating Spotify playlists for every podcast episode that I record where the songs are tangentially related to an episode topic. For this week's playlist, we've got Michael Penn's All-Star Band. That's right. It's a collection of Michael Penn songs, only from March, because those are the only ones I know, and those of other popular singers with famous Hollywood types as relatives. And it's all brought to you by Delta Airlines, America's best airline. No, I really mean it. I love Delta, and it would be dope if they would be willing to actually sponsor us before my next trip. Come on, Delta. Wheels up, baby. Join us next time when I need my neck roll.